The restaurant buzzed softly, a low hum of voices, clinking glasses, and the faint melody of a piano tucked in the corner. I adjusted my tie again, feeling slightly out of place in my carefully chosen suit. The anniversary felt significant, a reminder of the years Elise and I had built together. Across the table, Elise twirled the stem of her wine glass between her fingers, her smile lighting up briefly as she glanced at me. "You went all out tonight, Henry," she said, her tone even, but something lingered beneath it. "For you, Elise," I replied, leaning forward. "After 21 years, I think we deserve it." She tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You're sweet." "Predictable, but sweet." I chuckled, not sure how to respond. "Well, I thought you might appreciate a night out. It's been a while since we've had a proper date." She sipped her wine, her gaze drifting over my shoulder. "True. It's been busy lately," she murmured. "Busy." An odd choice of words. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Elise always had a way of saying things that left you wondering if she meant more than she let on. "Is something on your mind?" I asked, trying to break the silence. She blinked, as if startled, and turned her attention back to me. "No, just thinking." "About what?" Before she could answer, the sound of laughter erupted from a nearby table, pulling our attention. A group of sharply dressed men sat a few tables away, their voices louder than the refined setting seemed to allow. As I turned back to Elise, she froze. Her expression shifted, part surprise, part something else I couldn't read. Following her gaze, I saw him. He walked confidently toward us, his polished shoes barely making a sound on the carpeted floor. His suit fit him like it was made by someone who charged more for a jacket than I earned in a month. "Elise," he said, his voice dripping with familiarity. I felt the temperature in the room drop. Elise's eyes widened, and her fingers tightened around her glass. The man's gaze didn't waver as he stopped at our table. "So, this is the guy you settled for?" he said, his words casual but loaded with venom. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice sharp. For the first time, he turned to look at me, his smirk widening as though he'd only just noticed me sitting there. "I'm talking to Elise." "You don't mind, do you?" My jaw tightened. "I do mind. Who the hell are you?" Elise's hand shot out, touching my arm. "Henry, don't." "Don't what?" "Elise, who is this?" The man chuckled. "She didn't tell you? That's cute." He leaned closer to her, ignoring me entirely. "Elise, why are you hesitating? Come on, let's show him how it's done. I'll make you forget all about this." He gestured vaguely at me. "Mediocrity." I stared at Elise, waiting for her to explode, to tell him to leave, to do something. But she didn't. Her face turned pink, and she bit her lip, her eyes darting between him and me. "Elise," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. "What is this?" She glanced at me, but said nothing. That silence burned more than any words could. The man reached for her hand, and I acted without thinking. "Get your damn hand off her," I snapped, standing so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. The man's smirk only deepened as he tightened his grip. "Relax. She's coming with me. You'll get her back when I'm done." A red haze blurred my vision. My hand moved on instinct, grabbing his wrist in a tight grip. Before I knew it, a sharp twist and a loud crack echoed through the room. "My hand!" he screamed, stumbling back and clutching his wrist. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. Elise gasped, jumping to her feet. "Henry, are you insane?" "Insane?" I repeated, incredulous. "Who is this guy, Elise? Why is he talking to you like this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she crouched next to him, her hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to him, her voice soft, almost tender. My stomach turned. "You're sorry? For what? Defending yourself? Defending us?" She looked up at me, her expression hardening. "You've humiliated me, Henry. I told you not to make a scene." "A scene?" "This asshole walked up to our table, insulted me, and treated you like you were, I don't even know what. And I'm the problem?" She stood, brushing imaginary dust off her dress. "Yes, you are. You always have to overreact. You've ruined everything." The words hit like a slap. "Elise," I said, my voice low, pleading, "you're seriously going to leave with him?" After everything we've been through? She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the man, who was still cradling his wrist but managing a smug grin. Come on, she said to him. Let's get out of here. Elise, I called after her, but she didn't even glance back. She walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving me standing there, humiliated and alone. The waiter approached hesitantly, his eyes darting between me and the door. Sir, is everything okay? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. No, it's not. Bring me the bill. As he walked away, I sank back into my chair, my hands shaking. The whispers from nearby tables grew louder, every glance in my direction a dagger. I couldn't believe it. After 21 years, it had come to this. The wine glass sat untouched in front of me. I stared at it, the candlelight flickering in its depths, and wondered how we had gotten here. Had I missed the signs? Had she always been this way? The waiter returned with the check, placing it gently on the table. Take your time, he said softly, his tone kind. I nodded, pulling out my wallet. As I counted the bills, my mind raced. Elise's words played on a loop in my head. You've ruined everything. No, she had ruined everything. I left the restaurant, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. As I walked to the car, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Elise wasn't the woman I thought she was. Maybe she never had been. Sliding into the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel tightly. My knuckles turned white as I fought to keep my emotions in check. By the time I got home, the anger had turned to something colder. Resolute, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. Each one felt like a mockery now, a reminder of the life I thought we had. When Elise walked through that door again, I would have answers, or I would have an end. The silence felt suffocating. It was the kind of silence that wasn't just an absence of sound. It was the void left by betrayal, by something irreparably broken. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, keys in hand, staring into the darkness. Elise wasn't there. I wasn't sure why I'd expected her to be. I set my keys on the counter and walked to the liquor cabinet. My hands trembled as I pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a glass. Pouring it, I watched the amber liquid swirl before I downed half of it in one go. It burned, but the pain was grounding. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing in particular. My mind raced, replaying the night over and over. Her expression when he'd grabbed her hand, the flush in her cheeks, her biting her lip, the way she had left with him, as if I were nothing. I clenched the glass in my hand, feeling the sharp edges of my anger cutting through the haze of humiliation. What the hell was that? I muttered to myself. The questions in my head were endless, but there were no answers. None that mattered anyway. I poured another glass, then another, until the room blurred around the edges. Still, the pain refused to dull. The hours dragged, each one heavier than the last. I watched the front door, half expecting her to walk in and pretend like nothing had happened. When the clock struck 3 a.m., it became clear she wasn't coming home. Instead of going to bed, I grabbed a notepad from the kitchen drawer and sat back down. I didn't know where to start, but I knew this wasn't something I could leave to chance. I scribbled furiously, my mind racing ahead of my pen. The whiskey had fueled my anger, but it was a cold, focused anger now. By dawn, I had a plan. The next morning, I called the bank. The clerk on the other end was polite but hesitant. You're sure you want to transfer the entire balance, Mr. Carter? Yes, I said firmly. Every penny. Move it to my personal account. There was a long pause. All right, sir. That will take effect immediately. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. Every joint account was now drained. The safety net Elise had always taken for granted was gone. My next call was to my lawyer, Lisa Marshall. Henry, she said when she picked up. What's going on? You sound off. I need to file for divorce, I said without hesitation. There was a brief silence on her end. That's sudden. Did something happen? I caught her. With someone else. Publicly. It's over. Her voice softened, but it held a professional edge. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's get to work. Are you looking for a clean split? Or do you want to fight? Fight, I said, the word coming out like a growl. Good. Then we'll start by freezing any remaining assets in her name. If she's been hiding anything, we'll find it. For the next 3 days, I buried myself in preparations. The house was eerily quiet, but I welcomed it. It gave me space to think. The photos of us together stared down at me from the walls. I considered taking them down, but decided against it. Let them be witnesses to her betrayal. On the third evening, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the stillness. I didn't move, didn't rise to greet her. Instead, I stayed on the couch, staring at the stack of papers on the coffee table. The front door opened, and Elise walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She looked tired but not particularly remorseful, as though she were coming home from an ordinary trip. She paused when she saw me, then glanced at the coffee table. "What's all this?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to see if she'd lie, if she'd offer some excuse. But she didn't. She just stood there waiting. "You know exactly what it is," I said finally, my voice cold. "It's over, Elise. I'm done." Her brow furrowed. "Done? What are you talking about?" I picked up the divorce papers and held them out. "I want you to sign these. Pack your things and leave." Her eyes widened, her composure cracking. "Henry, wait. Don't do this. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I snapped. "You left with him, Elise. You didn't even bother to come home and explain. You made your choice." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Henry, I didn't know what to do." I panicked. "He didn't mean anything. It was just, don't," I interrupted, standing up. "Don't insult me with lies. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way you walked out with him." Tears welled in her eyes. I was confused. "I made a mistake, but we've been together for so long. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I laughed bitterly. "It did, until you threw it away." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Henry, please. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance." I shook my head. "I gave you 21 years. You don't get another chance." Her tears fell freely now, and she sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" "That's not my problem," I said, my tone flat. Her head shot up, her eyes red and desperate. "You can't just throw me out like this." "Watch me," I said, turning away. She spent the next hour packing, her sobs echoing through the house. I didn't help. I didn't offer her comfort. By the time she stood by the door with her bags, she looked at me one last time. "Henry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. I just closed the door behind her. When she was gone, I poured myself another glass of whiskey and sat on the couch. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It felt like freedom. The morning after Elise left, I stared at the hollow quietness of my home. It didn't feel like home anymore. The walls seemed colder, the air heavier. The pictures of our life together, once symbols of love and stability, felt like mockery. I couldn't stay there. By noon, I was on the phone with a real estate agent. "I want to sell the house," I said bluntly. "You're sure?" she asked. "It's a beautiful property. This kind of sale usually takes time to sell it fast. Whatever price you can get." Within a week, I'd packed the essentials and left the house for good. I rented a small apartment in a city 2 hours away. It wasn't much, just a single bedroom with a tiny balcony, but it was mine. No ghosts from the past. I dove into work like a man possessed. Late nights at the office turned into early mornings. My desk became my fortress, my plans and spreadsheets the only companions I allowed. Promotions came quickly, not because I was lucky, but because I was relentless. "Henry, you're killing it," my boss said one afternoon, slapping me on the back. "I'm thinking about moving you up to project lead. You up for it?" "I'm always up for it," I replied without hesitation. It wasn't just work. I started hitting the gym every morning before dawn. At first, it was just to fill the hours, but soon, the physical transformation matched the mental one. My once soft physique hardened into something stronger. Each drop of sweat felt like purging a part of my old life, of the man I used to be. The few friends I allowed into my circle noticed the change. "Man, you're like a machine these days," Kevin, a colleague, said over beers one evening. "Discipline," I replied simply. "What are you trying to prove?" he asked. I paused, then shrugged. "To myself? That I'm better off." Meanwhile, Lisa, my lawyer, was hard at work dismantling the arrogant bastard who'd ruined my marriage. Every few weeks, I'd get a call from her with updates. "You won't believe this," she said one day, a hint of amusement in her tone. "Turns out Elise's boyfriend, Mr. Perfect, has a laundry list of financial scandals." "Go on," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Fraud, unpaid debts, even a shell company that collapsed. The guy's a walking disaster." A slow smile spread across my face. And she continued, "We can hit him where it hurts. His remaining assets are tied up in ongoing lawsuits, but I'm confident we can get a chunk of it. Want me to move forward?" "Absolutely." It became a game, a chess match where every move stripped him of something he valued. I wasn't just suing him for the humiliation he'd caused me. I was erasing him. By the time Lisa was done, he was financially ruined. His assets were liquidated, his reputation destroyed. 3 years passed in a blur of work, growth, and quiet satisfaction. I hadn't heard from Elise in all that time, and I didn't care to. For the first time in decades, I felt truly free. One evening, I sat on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment, a glass of wine in hand. The city lights stretched out before me, a shimmering sea of possibilities. I had everything I needed: a successful career, financial security, and a peace I hadn't known I craved. Kevin joined me, dropping into the chair next to mine. "So, when are you going to stop pretending you're a hermit and start dating again?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Not interested." "Come on," he prodded. "You've rebuilt your entire life. What's stopping you from letting someone in?" "Letting someone in is what got me here in the first place," I replied. "That's not fair," he said. "Not everyone is like Elise." His words lingered long after he left. Was I hiding behind my work and routine? Or was I genuinely content? The answer came unexpectedly one afternoon. I was grabbing coffee at a corner cafe when I noticed a woman struggling with her order at the counter. Tall latte, extra foam, 1 pump of wait no, 2 pumps of caramel. And she sighed, flustered. The barista looked equally confused. "So, just to clarify, make it 2 lattes," I interjected, stepping up beside her. "1 regular, 1 whatever she just said." The woman turned to me, surprised. "Oh, I didn't mean..." "It's fine," I said with a small smile. "Consider it an act of caffeine-related charity." She laughed, and the sound was warm, genuine. "Thank you. I swear I'm not usually this complicated." "Sure you're not," I teased. We ended up sharing a table, and by the time we parted ways, I had her number. Her name was Claire, and she was refreshingly different from anyone I'd met before. She was straightforward, kind, and most importantly, she didn't come with a weight of old baggage. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but over the following months, Claire and I grew closer. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and that was enough. One evening, as we sat on my balcony, she asked, "Why do you hesitate every time you talk about your past?" I took a deep breath, because it's not something I'm proud of. I trusted someone who betrayed me, and it took everything I had to rebuild after that. She nodded, thoughtful. "But you're here now. That says something." I looked at her, the city lights reflected in her eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could let go of the past. The scars Elise had left were still there, but they no longer defined me. I was stronger, sharper, and more alive than I had ever been. My new beginning wasn't just about leaving her behind. It was about finding myself again. The rain battered against the windows, the rhythmic drumming filling the silence of my apartment. I sat in my armchair with a book in hand, the dim light from a nearby lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. The storm outside was relentless, but inside, everything was calm, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of my past. Then, a knock at the door shattered the quiet. I frowned, setting the book down. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Rising from my chair, I crossed the room, each step echoing against the hardwood floor. When I opened the door, the sight before me was like something out of a memory I'd long buried. Elise stood there, drenched from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face, and her clothes were soaked, plastered against her thin frame. Her eyes were bloodshot, dark circles betraying the weight of sleepless nights. "Henry," she whispered, her voice shaking. It wasn't the confident, polished tone I remembered. It was raw, broken. I said nothing, gripping the door tighter. I made a mistake, she continued, her voice barely audible over the storm. Please, I have nothing left. He ruined me, and I ruined us. I'm so sorry. I stood there, the rain lashing against her back, watching as tears mingled with the raindrops on her face. For a moment, I felt something, a flicker of pity, perhaps, but it was quickly smothered by the years of anger and betrayal that had hardened my heart. Elise, I said quietly, stepping to the side. You're soaked. Come in before you catch pneumonia. She stepped inside hesitantly, her eyes scanning the apartment. It was nothing like the home we once shared. Sparse but warm, it was a reflection of the man I'd become, clean, focused, unburdened by the past. I handed her a towel from the hall closet. She took it without a word, wrapping it around her shoulders as she shivered. Sit, I said, gesturing to the couch. She perched on the edge, her hands clutching the towel like a lifeline. I moved to the kitchen and poured a cup of tea, setting it on the coffee table in front of her. Thank you, she murmured, her voice hoarse. I sat across from her, studying her face. The years hadn't been kind. There were fine lines around her eyes and mouth, signs of stress and regret etched into her once pristine features. She looked older, smaller, as though the weight of her choices had physically diminished her. What do you want, Elise? I asked finally, breaking the tense silence. She flinched, looking down at her hands. I didn't know where else to go. That doesn't answer my question. She looked up then, her eyes glistening with fresh tears. I wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry, to beg for another chance. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Another chance? After everything you did? Henry, please, she said, leaning forward. I was stupid. I didn't see what I had until it was gone. He destroyed me. He drained my accounts, ruined my reputation. I lost my job, my friends, everything. Sounds like karma, I said coldly. She recoiled, as if I'd slapped her. I deserve that. I deserve worse. But I'm here now, trying to make things right. I shook my head, leaning back in my chair. You don't get to show up here years later and act like we can just rewind the clock. You left me, Elise. You humiliated me. And now, because your little fantasy blew up in your face, you think you can crawl back? Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no satisfaction in her pain. I wasn't thinking, she choked out. I thought I wanted something exciting, something different. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. Why am I asked suddenly, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked, startled. What? Why him, Elise? I repeated, my tone colder now. Out of all the people in the world, why him? She hesitated, wiping at her tears. He made me feel young again. Wanted. I thought he cared about me. And what about me? I shot back. Didn't 21 years mean anything? Or was I just a placeholder until something exciting came along? Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands. I don't know, she sobbed. I was selfish. I wasn't thinking. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The rain continued to pour, the city lights blurred behind streaks of water on the glass. Her words churned in my head, a bitter cocktail of regret and anger. You were wrong, I said finally, turning back to her. I'm not that man anymore. The one who would wait, who would forgive and forget. That man is gone. She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. Henry, please. I'll do anything. I'll prove to you that I've changed. Just let me try. I laughed again, though there was no humor in it. Changed? Elise, you didn't come here because you've changed. You came here because you've hit rock bottom. Because you're desperate. Don't confuse regret with growth. Her lip quivered, and for a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then she slumped, defeated. You're right, she admitted. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm begging you, please, help me. I have nowhere else to go. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I walked to the door and opened it. I'm sorry for what you've been through, I said, my voice flat. But you're too late, Elise. I've moved on. You should too. She stood slowly, clutching the towel like a shield. Henry, don't do this, she whispered. I already have. Her tears flowed freely as she stepped into the storm. I watched her disappear into the rain, her figure swallowed by the darkness. Closing the door, I leaned against it, my chest tight. For the first time in years, I allowed myself a moment to grieve, not for her, but for the life we'd lost. But it was just a moment, because as much as her return had stirred old wounds, it also reminded me of how far I'd come. I wasn't that broken man anymore, and I refused to let her drag me back into the past. I poured myself a drink and returned to my chair, the storm outside fading into the background as I reclaimed my peace. As the door closed behind Elise that stormy night, I felt an unshakable sense of finality. Her presence had lingered like a shadow for years, but now, for the first time, it was as though that shadow had been banished. The storm outside raged on, but inside me, there was calm, a clear path forward, unburdened by the past. The following days reaffirmed what I already knew. I had no room in my life for regret or second chances where Elise was concerned. My world had moved on, and at the center of that world was Grace. Grace came into my life quietly, almost unexpectedly. We met at a professional conference about 6 months after I moved to the city. She was seated next to me during a panel discussion, furiously scribbling notes while still managing to interject thoughtful questions to the speakers. During a break, I noticed her flipping through her notes, muttering to herself. "Missed that last statistic," she said, clearly frustrated. "It was 27%, I offered, sliding my notes toward her. She blinked, surprised, then broke into a warm smile. "You're a lifesaver." "Thanks." We struck up a conversation, exchanging ideas about the industry and laughing over some of the more boring presentations. By the end of the day, we'd exchanged numbers. Over the weeks that followed, we started meeting for coffee, then dinner. It was slow, unhurried, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of expectation. Grace was refreshingly open, her straightforwardness a stark contrast to the duplicity I'd experienced before. One evening, Grace and I sat on my balcony, the city skyline twinkling around us. She leaned back in her chair, her wine glass in hand. "You're different tonight," she said, studying me. "Different how?" I asked. "Lighter, like you've let go of something heavy." I considered her words, swirling the wine in my glass. "Maybe I have," I admitted. "Someone from my past showed up recently. It stirred up a lot, but it also reminded me of how far I've come." She tilted her head, her curiosity evident, but her tone gentle. "Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Her name is Elise. She was my wife." Grace's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she said nothing, letting me continue. "She cheated on me, left me humiliated and broken. For a long time, I let that define me, let her betrayal dictate who I was. But when she showed up again, begging for forgiveness, I realized I didn't need closure from her. I'd already closed that chapter on my own." Grace reached out, placing her hand over mine. "It sounds like you've been through hell, Henry, but you came out of it stronger." "Stronger, maybe," I said, meeting her gaze. "But I don't think I'd have rediscovered trust without you." Her smile was soft but radiant. "I think we've both been lucky then." While my life blossomed, Elise's continued to unravel. Lisa, my lawyer, occasionally updated me on the fallout from the lawsuits against her former lover. Apparently, his financial misdeeds had left him not only bankrupt, but also blacklisted from his industry. Rumors swirled that he had fled the country, leaving Elise to face the wreckage alone. I wasn't keeping tabs on her out of malice. It was more like watching the consequences of a story that had already ended. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with them. One afternoon, months after a visit, I ran into Elise at a grocery store. It was pure coincidence, but the encounter was jarring nonetheless. She looked thin, her clothes mismatched and baggy, her once polished appearance now disheveled. She was staring at the prices of canned soup, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Elise," I said, surprised. She turned sharply, her eyes widening when she saw me. "Henry." An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, she gave a weak smile. "You look good." "Thanks," I said, unsure what else to say. She glanced down at her cart, filled with the cheapest staples, ramen, canned vegetables, instant coffee. Things have been hard, she admitted. I nodded but said nothing. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly, as if reading my thoughts. It's good to see you. Take care of yourself, Elise, I said finally. Her face fell, but she nodded. You too, Henry. As I walked away, I felt no triumph in her downfall, only a quiet sadness for the person she might have been if she hadn't made those choices. Grace and I continued to grow closer. She became my partner in every sense, supportive without being overbearing, challenging me in ways that made me better. One evening, as we cooked dinner together in my apartment, Grace turned to me with a mischievous grin. So, are you ever going to let me redecorate this place? Or are we keeping this single bachelor vibe forever? I laughed. It's not that bad, is it? It's functional, she teased. But I think we can do better. Fine, I said, throwing up my hands. I'll let you bring in some color, but no pink throw pillows. Deal, she said, leaning up to kiss me. Months later, Grace and I attended a charity gala together. It was a formal affair, with glittering chandeliers and a live orchestra. As we mingled with the crowd, I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Grace fit into my world. At one point, she tugged me onto the dance floor. I don't dance, I protested. Tonight you do, she said with a grin, pulling me into the music. As we swayed to the rhythm, I realized how far I'd come. Grace had given me something I hadn't thought possible, hope for a future built on trust and mutual respect. The transformation wasn't just about moving on from Elise. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, rediscovering what I wanted from life, and realizing I deserved more than what I'd settled for in the past. Elise had been a lesson, painful but necessary. Grace was the reward, a second chance at happiness that I hadn't dared to dream of. And as I looked into Grace's eyes that night, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees lining the bustling street. Grace and I strolled hand in hand, window shopping as the city buzzed with life around us. It was a perfect day, one of those rare moments when everything felt aligned. We paused at a corner cafe. Grace pointed at the chalkboard menu. I'm definitely trying their lavender latte, she said, her enthusiasm contagious. Another latte? I teased. We've been to 3 coffee shops today. Don't judge me, she said, laughing. It's a hobby, not an addiction. As she ordered, I stepped to the side, glancing down the street. That's when I saw her. Elise. She stood across the street, holding a battered canvas bag, her figure almost unrecognizable. Her once perfectly styled hair was now limp and streaked with gray. Her face, once proud and confident, was drawn and weary, with dark circles under her eyes. She was staring into a shop window, but there was no spark in her gaze, only a hollow sadness. I froze. The memories of our life together came rushing back. Not the love we once shared, but the betrayal, the humiliation, the anger. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if she had seen me. Then, as if sensing my presence, Elise turned. Her eyes met mine, and she stopped, startled. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't move. The world seemed to pause. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by something I couldn't quite place. Shame? Regret? Maybe both. Grace's voice broke the spell. Henry? I turned to see her holding 2 cups, her head tilted in curiosity. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. Everything's fine. Elise was still watching, her eyes darting between Grace and me. She hesitated, clutching her bag tightly, as if it were a lifeline. For a moment, it seemed like she might cross the street, approach us, but I didn't wait to find out. I gave Elise a small, polite nod, an acknowledgement of her presence, nothing more. Then, as Grace slipped her arm through mine, I smiled. It wasn't forced or bitter, but genuine and peaceful. Elise's expression faltered. She looked down, her shoulders slumping. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words, but none of them mattered. Who was that? Grace asked as we began walking again. No one important, I replied, and for the first time in years, I truly meant it. Later that evening, Grace and I sat on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn as we watched an old comedy. She laughed so hard she snorted, which made me laugh even harder. "You're never letting that go, are you?" she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Not a chance," I said, grinning. The memory of Elise crossed my mind briefly, but it didn't linger. Seeing her today had been closure, a final page turned in a book I no longer needed to read. A few weeks later, I ran into Lisa, my lawyer, during a charity auction. She sipped her champagne and gave me a knowing look. "Heard Elise is still in the city," she said casually. "I saw her," I admitted. "She looked different." Lisa smirked. Her lover's financial fallout hit her hard. "Rumor has it she's barely scraping by. Karma, I suppose." "I don't think about it much anymore," I said honestly. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "That's a healthy attitude. Not many people get to that point." I shrugged. "It's not about her anymore. I've moved on." Lisa gave me an approving nod. "Good for you, Henry. Not everyone rebuilds like you did." One evening, Grace and I were hosting a small dinner party at my apartment. The place looked different now, bright, warm, with Grace's touch evident in every corner. As I refilled glasses and laughed with friends, I realized just how far I'd come. The man I was during my marriage to Elise felt like a stranger, a distant version of myself I no longer recognized. At one point, Grace caught my arm, pulling me aside. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft amid the lively chatter. "I'm better than okay," I said, leaning in to kiss her. Months later, as Grace and I planned a trip to Europe, I came across an old photo album tucked in the back of a closet. It was from the early days of my marriage to Elise. I flipped through it briefly, the faces smiling back at me like echoes from another life. I didn't feel sadness or anger, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had been. I closed the album and placed it in a donation box. The transformation wasn't about forgetting the past, but accepting it. Elise had been a chapter, a painful, defining chapter, but not the whole story. As Grace and I boarded our flight a week later, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the pain that had taught me resilience, for the betrayal that had pushed me to rediscover myself, and for the love that had shown me how to trust again. Elise was nothing more than a lesson now, a reminder of what I'd overcome. And as the plane soared into the clouds, I couldn't help but smile. The seasons changed, and life moved steadily forward. Grace and I had built a life that felt unshakable, a foundation of honesty, joy, and quiet strength. But as life often does, it had one more unexpected turn waiting for me. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I received a letter. The envelope was plain, with no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, Elise's. I stood in my doorway, staring at it. Part of me wanted to toss it in the trash, to leave the past buried. But curiosity, or perhaps closure, compelled me to open it. The letter was short, just a single page. "Henry, I'm writing this because I know I owe you more than I ever gave. I owe you an apology, one that comes from a place of true understanding of the pain I caused. It's taken me years to accept that the life I destroyed wasn't just mine, but yours too. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only hope you know how deeply sorry I am for everything. You were a good man, and I was too blind to see it. I found work at a shelter, helping others rebuild their lives. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, and it's taught me humility in ways I never imagined. If nothing else, I hope you know that your strength and dignity gave me the courage to try and be better, even if it's too late for us. I wish you happiness, truly." Elise, I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel anger or pity, only a faint sense of relief that she was trying to find her way forward, even if it was too late for us. That evening, Grace noticed my quiet mood. "What's on your mind?" she asked, sliding onto the couch beside me. "I got a letter today," I said, handing it to her. "From Elise." Grace read it carefully, her expression thoughtful. When she finished, she set it down and met my gaze. "How do you feel about it?" "Honestly, I'm glad she's trying to fix her life. But it doesn't change anything for me," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "What we have now is all I care about." Grace smiled, leaning into me. "I think that's the healthiest answer you could give." Months later, Grace and I visited a gallery showcasing local artists. As we wandered through the exhibits, I stopped at a painting that caught my eye. It was a simple yet evocative piece. A tree standing alone in the middle of a barren field, its branches reaching skyward as if refusing to give up. Beautiful, isn't it? Grace said, stepping beside me. It is, I agreed. In a way, it felt symbolic. That tree, standing tall despite the desolation around it, mirrored the journey I had taken, the resilience, the determination to grow even when the odds were stacked against me. Grace took my hand, and we continued through the gallery. Years later, as Grace and I sat on the porch of our home, sipping coffee and watching the sunset, I reflected on the life I had rebuilt. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, all of it felt like a distant memory, a storm I had weathered to reach this place of peace. Grace turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how lucky I am," I said, smiling at her. Her laugh was soft, her hand finding mine. "Well, I'd say we're both pretty lucky." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that my story had come full circle. I had found not only love again, but also myself. And as Grace rested her head on my shoulder, I knew that this quiet, simple happiness was all I'd ever need.